Hi, in this video I'll discuss the working of the sum, count and average functions together with their very famous if variants. These if variants means that you can work with these functions with certain conditions. And to implement these conditions you need a very particular way of notation. And these are the only functions who have these if variants. If you ever need other functions and work with conditions, then you need a completely other technique in Excel, and we will not discuss this in this video because it's rather complicated. So enjoy. A big difference between the count function and the sum function is the following. The count function counts cells, and the sum function sums the content of cells. So this is really very important to understand. I know that sometimes it is confusing, but remember that the count function counts cells and the sum function sums the content of cells. So if I use the count function like this, I count all the numbers in the range A1 till A10, and I have here some numbers put it in from A1 till A5, I get as a result 5. So the count function counts the cells with a number in it. A1 till A10, like this, I get 5. If I put in a date, like this, then remember a date is also a number and it will be counted by the count function. If I put in text, it will not be counted. So the count function just counts everything where data type number is in it. If you want to count cells which are not empty, you have another function, and it's the count A function. So count A function counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Okay, so let's try this one for A1 till A10, my range, and it gives me 5, and if I put text here, then it gives me 6. 6 cells are founded in this range that are not empty. No? And you see this text is not counted here. For the count function, it just counts numbers. Sometimes the result of a function can be an empty string. An empty text string will be counted by the count A function. What do I mean with this? Well, let's say you have here the function if error, and what does the if error do? Well, you can give a formula as the first argument. So let's do this, dividing 1 by 0, and you know this gives an error. And if it gives an error, then it will return the second argument. And the second argument, sometimes you just don't want to do anything. You don't want to put in 0, you just want to return an empty string as a kind of an empty cell, but you can't give an empty cell in Excel. It doesn't exist. So mostly you do something like this. You have your formula here, and if this formula gives an error, then returns an empty string. And an empty string is put it in by double quotes. Well, you don't see anything in this cell, but it gave me back, because it's an error, it gave me back, let me put this one here, it gave me back an empty string, and this empty string is counted by the count A function, is not counted by the count function. So it's a little bit the same if I would do this, yeah, equals an empty string. So be aware that if you have a count A function, that it will count even empty string cells. It's not the same as an empty cell. There is text in it, but it's empty, this text. If I would do an examination of the data type, is text. Where do I have it here? Is text for this cell A8, then you see, yes, it is text. So this is really text. I put it in as a result of a certain function. It's commonly used, so that's why I explain this now further. For the template, you don't need to know this. So we have the function count. It counts cells where a data type number is in it. Count A counts every cell which is not empty. And then you have the last one. And let me quickly show you this, but I think it's very obvious what this one will do. It's the count blank function, and it just counts blank cells. So count blank in the same range, and it count blank. So let's now talk about the very important conditional variants of the count function and of the sum function and average function. And you have two different conditional variants. You have the if and the ifs. Now, the count if and the count ifs, as you have the sum if, and sum ifs as you have the average if and average ifs. And the difference between those two is that you have, for the if variant, you can add one condition, and for the ifs variant, you can add more conditions. It's the only difference. Luckily, they work all in the same way. So I have here some more numbers in my range, A1 till A10, and let me show you how this COUNTIF function works. Well, first of all, you need to give the COUNTIF function a range, and then you need to give the COUNTIF function a criteria. And the criteria is the condition. The condition to count the cells in the range you gave. So let us stay with the range A1 till A10. And then for the criteria, well, it works in a very particular way. For example, if I want to count all the cells where I find the number 5 in it, then I do something like this. Yes. So first you give the range, and second you give your condition, and your condition, if you equals it for a certain number, you just give the number. So this gives me 1, as there is just one cell with the number 5 in it. This is the cell. If I here change this to 5, then you see that I get 2. Let me put it in here. Okay. What if I want to count the cells which are greater than 5? Okay, so the range stays the same. And then between double quotes, I have to put the condition like this, so that it's very important. So if you say equals 5, then I just could put in the number like this, or I could do this. It's the same. Yeah. If you say greater than 5, then I have to put it in like this between double quotes. So the criteria, the condition you give is normally between double quotes. And then you have the greater than sign if you want to search for, if you want to count cells which are greater than a certain number, or greater than equal than a certain number, or less than a certain number, less or equal, or just different from. These are all the combinations you have for the condition for data type number. So let's do it like this. Count all the cells which are greater or equal than 5, between double quotes, greater or equal than 5. And Excel found 6 cells which match this condition. Okay. So of course, if I change this one, it stays the same. Of course, if I change it to number 2, then there are 5 cells which match the condition greater or equal than 5. Instead of hard coding the 5 like I did here, of course I can use the content of a cell. Let me show you how this is done. The syntax changes a little bit. I'm going to take this function, I'm going to put it here, and I'm going in this cell B1. I put in the number 5, and let me show you how this is done here in the formula. So you can't type in between the double quotes, you can't type in the reference to the cell. It is not recognized by Excel. You have a little bit of weird syntax if you don't know the ampersand character here, but you have to use this ampersand character and then you can reference a cell. Yeah? Now Excel knows that you mean the content of the cell B1. Let me evaluate this. Copy. Um, and of course, if I change now this number, Excel counts 3 cells which are greater than 7, and that of course must be these 3. So the special syntax we use here is the ampersand character to concatenate 2 strings. And the first string is between double quotes greater or equal than, and the second string is the content of cell B1. That's the way you have to do this. And how does this work for the countifs function? If you add another condition and another condition, well, I can show you that as follows. Let's say I put in here a new number, and let's say I want a second condition and I want to count all cells which are greater than B1 and less than B2. And each cell is counted when it fulfills all the conditions. That's very important. It must fulfill all the conditions and then it's counted. For example, let me show you this with countifs here. First criteria range 1. You see there is a 1 added now because we can add more conditions. First criteria. Here we stay with our A1 till A10. Second argument is the greater than sign, the ampersand character, and then reference to B1. So count all the cells which are greater than whatever is in B1, and now it's the number 3. Okay, and then the second condition, we first have to give the second range for this condition. So I select the same range, A1 till A10, and I have to add the second condition. Here, I want to count all the cells which are less than the content of B2. So what's happening now? First condition, all cells are counted when they are bigger than content of cell B1, and that's I put in the number 3. So these, except this one, these are counted. These are left. All the others, they fall off. Then in the same range, I need to count every cell which is less than 8. And 1, 2, 3, and these 2 are already not counted anymore. So what still, which cells are left over are 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. So, and then Excel is going to see for the second condition which are less than 8. That must be this 6, this 5, this 4. So 3 cells. And here it is. So that's the way that Excel calculates with multiple conditions. First condition, see what's left. Second condition, and so on. Even third condition, fourth condition. I think you can go to 256 conditions, but you'll of course never get there. Let me change this in 7, and now we have 4. So first condition for the range A1 till A10, we have everything greater than 3, so these are selected. Then in the same range, everything what is less than 8, so these are the ones who are counted. Very important here is that the range you put in here, this range here, and this range here, they must be the same. Absolutely. Well, let's say not the columns must be the same, but the rows absolutely must be the same. Don't ever try it in another way. Don't change them because you get weird results. Okay, so keep it simple. Always get the rows in the same way, and the columns you may change. Let me show you this when columns are changing. I'm going to copy this range here. I'm going to copy in H. Let me do it this way. Okay. Okay, we have some other numbers. What is going to happen with the COUNTIFs function if I use the same rows but different columns? Well, let's say I want to count every cell which is greater than 3 in this range and less than 40 in this range. So I put in the number 40 here, and I go for the COUNTIFs function. First criterion, range, A1 till A10. First condition, first criterion, greater than 3 and 3 in B1. Second criterion, range, in column H. Second criterion, less than, and the ampersand sign, and I want to see what's in B2. Like this. And what is going to happen now? Okay, first criterion, A1 till A10, here, bigger than 3. So which cells are selected? These are selected. And these are the cells Excel is working with for the second condition. But for the second condition, what did I do? I changed the columns. So what does Excel do? Well, it figures out like, okay, you have these cells left and you want to bring them over in column H. Okay, he will bring this over in column H and he's going to see in these cells which are less than 40. Yeah, so that's very important that you see that Excel really first selects here the cells and then bring this selection over to the second column. That's why I say stay with the same number of rows. You can change the columns, but stay with the same number of rows. Otherwise, you get very weird results. And then in these cells, he's going to see, okay, for the number 40, which are less than 40. And that must be 3 cells that are these 3 cells. Okay, so if I, for example, hard code this, one moment, so, and these are selected, and I put in number 555555, then you see none is selected. Yeah? None is selected because here we have, for the first condition, we have these cells. Bring over the selection. Now going to look in these cells which are less than 40, none. So I get 0. And if I make this one 35, I get 1. And the beauty of this is that if you understand how the COUNTIF function works or the COUNTIFs function works, well, then you know also how the SUMIF function works or the average if function works, because they are really identical. Maybe there is one difference, and let me explain just the difference to make it clear, and then you'll see it's the same use as COUNTIF and COUNTIFs. So first of all, let's start with the SUMIF function. And SUMIF function has, for the two first arguments, they are really the same. So let's do the same. In this criteria range, I want to sum up all values which are greater or equal than the content of B1. Like this. Let me copy this. Okay. So you see here, COUNTIF function and COUNTIF function here and SUMIF function here are really identical. Here I count the cells, and here I sum up the content of the cells. So where's the difference? Well, the difference is in the last argument. As we have just two arguments for the count function, we have two arguments for the count function. If I go in here and I select my SUMIF function, you see I have three arguments. And the third argument is between square brackets. And if you remember, arguments between square brackets, you don't need to give them. Okay. But why is there a third argument? Well, let's use it. And we're going to have the same arguments for the first two. So in this range, I select the cells greater than this value. So from 4 till 10, greater than or equal. So the 3 is also included. So I have a selection of these cells, but I don't want to sum up these cells. No, I want to bring over this selection, for example, to here, and I want to sum up these cells. So that's what I do with the third argument. I just select another column where I want to sum up the cells. So let me copy this here and just go over it again. So what does this SUMIF function do? Well, in this range, it selects all values greater than or equal than the value in B1. So it will be this selection. And it will bring over this selection to this column, and it will sum up these cells. And we get 355, 355. We're going to take the SUMIF function like the COUNTIF function here. So you see here the criteria range 1, criteria 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2, but the first argument is different from COUNTIF. The first argument, you have to say to the function SUMIFs which cells has to be summed. And then you can give your range criteria and your criteria and so on, the other conditions. So if you see in, for example, here, you have immediately criteria range 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2, and so on. Okay. So here, for example, I say I want you to sum up all these cells, but they have to meet certain conditions, and the first condition will be look in these cells and select everything which is greater than B1, and then look in these cells and select everything which is less than B2, and I have now almost the same function, the same arguments as the count_if function, just the first one is different. From A1 to A10 greater than B1, from H1 to H10 less than B2, like this. Let me copy this. So, and the meaning, what is selected is just the same. Yeah, just the same as the count_ifs here. It's here just the same. So first, Excel is going to select in this range everything greater than B1. B1 is 3, so it will be these cells. This selection will be brought over to this column, and then in this column, everything which is less than 40, and that is just 35. And this cell is summed up, well, it is 35, of course. Let's make this one also 35, then we got 70. Huh? So you see how this works. So this is the only difference, and the SUMIF and SUMIF functions are the same as average if and average if function, but instead, of course, of summing up cells, content of cells, it's averaging the content of cells. That's the only difference. But the way of working, the way how Excel selects these cells, it's just the same. Up till now, I used in the conditions, I used other numbers to compare with. We had greater than or less than the 3 and the 40 here. But of course, you can use these functions, this SUMIF function or COUNTIF function, you can use these conditions with text data. For this, I created some text data here and here. And for example, let's say that Andy and Mark are sellers, and for product 1, Andy sold for 10 euros or something like that, and Mark for product 2 sold for 55 euros, and so on. Okay, it's very easy for you to have the total of these turnovers. 360, a simple sum function will do. But what if you add a condition? What if you want to know, for example, what's the total turnover for Andy here, or for Mark, or for Andy for product 1, and so on and so on. So let's do that here, and first have the total turnover for Andy. So that's a condition. Huh? I have to select the criteria range, and in the criteria range we select the necessary cells with the condition with the criteria. So I want to select Andy in this range. So what I can do as criteria, I can type Andy. And here you see, of course, there is nothing for at this moment what can be summed up because it's all text. But now you see the sum range. I can give the sum range and exactly the same way as I did here with the sum if from A1 to A10. Look for greater or equal to B1 to 3, and all these selected cells have them summed up in H1, H10. Exactly the same way this works. So go and look in G1 till G10 for the name Andy, select these cells, bring this selection over in column H and sum the numbers. So this gives me 125. So easy done with these functions. And of course, I don't have to type Andy here. I don't have to type the condition here, hard-coded. I can really select, for example, the content of cell N1. Let me do that here. Okay. So this is the same, but now I'm just going to refer to cell N1, and in cell N1 I have Andy. So it's just the same. Do I want to refer to N2? Then I have Mark, and watch it, I capitalized Mark. Yes, but it doesn't matter. It's case insensitive. So we have 235 for Mark, and for Andy it was, let me switch again to N1, 125. And this works in exactly the same way if we have multiple conditions. For example, if we want to know the turnover for Andy for product 1, we can do this as follows, some ifs. First, we select column H because here are the turnovers. Then we select the column of the sellers, column G, and here we're going to pick Andy, like this. And then we're going to select column L with the products, and I'm going to choose product 1. I'm going to type it. I've not referred to a cell like this, and we have the turnover for Andy in product 1. So what's happening? Go and look in J1 to J10, select every cell with Andy in, so these four, this one, and this one. Bring this selection over to L1 to L10. Here, go and look for product 1. So here's product 1 for Andy, here's product 1 for Andy, this one not, this is product 1 for Andy, and that's it. So we have like 35, and 10 and 15 is 25. These cells are added. So we become 60. So easy is it with the sum if and sum ifs function, or average ifs function, or count ifs functions. You can even use wildcards. Let me show you this with this example. Okay, let's say I don't want to type product. I know all the products here start with the name product and then a number. So if I do this, then I have the asterisk as a wildcard. And this means whatever text becomes before the 1, it doesn't matter. And then the text itself has to end with a 1. If I do this, it will also give me the same result. So the asterisk here is the wildcard, and it stands for text I don't know. Yes, if I do this, then it means any text that comes before 1, it doesn't matter, but then there has to be a 1 in this text, and then any text that comes after 1, it doesn't matter. This also shall give me the same result. Now, do I make a 2 instead of 1, then I will ask for the turnover for Andy for product. Oh, I don't know. Is there an end? Oh, yes, we have 45 here, just one cell. Okay. So that's the working of the wildcard. You also have another wildcard, and this one, and let me go back to one. The wildcard's question mark, and question mark stands for one character. The first character, it doesn't matter, and then we have to have the text reduct a space and then 1. You can even combine it. You can even do this. It makes not a lot of sense here, but it's all the same. It will work. Yeah? So if I go here and I make an M, for example, you see this one will react on it because it wants to have the name product 1, and here it doesn't care because we have a question mark stands for, it doesn't matter what character becomes before the R, an M or a P, it doesn't matter. Okay, doesn't make a lot of sense here, but okay, that's just to show you that you have wildcards like the asterisk and the question mark you can use in your criteria to search for text. Okay, let me make this the P again, like this. Then now the last example, and this one is a little bit difficult because what we're going to do, the question here will be, I want a turnover for Mark and Andy. So, and sorry, for Mark and Andy and for product one. Okay, so we have three conditions. We have condition Mark, to select Mark here. We have to condition Andy. We have to select Andy here. And we have to select product one here. And this will be our sum range. So let's do this. Maybe I copy this one here. And I will make my formula here. Sum ifs, sum range, very easy. Then let me select Andy. And Andy, I can refer to this cell. Let me select Mark. Go here. And let me select product one. And I have to type this. And just think this over. And what do you think the result will be? Well, the result is 0. What went wrong? Remember, we've always said in the first criteria range, you select Andy. So here in this range, Andy is selected. So these 4, 5 cells are selected. Then we go to the next criteria range. It's the same, so we still stay in column G. And then we're going to look for, yes, Mark. But we just selected Andy everywhere, and there will be no Mark. So this leads to 0 selection of cells. So it doesn't matter even if product one or whatever is the last condition. Here, this will result in a 0 selection. And why is this? This is because all the condition has to be met, and you can't. And a condition to be met is in one row. Yeah, Andy for product one, Andy for product one, Andy for product one. Well, we add these 3. We never had the situation that in the same column we have Andy and Mark together. It's impossible. Or it's Andy or it's Mark. So every selection has to be met, and it's like what they call an AND operator. You have Andy and product one, Andy and product one for the selection, and you can't have Andy and Mark in the same cell. You have Andy or Mark and product one. That's what we want. Andy or Mark and product one. And we have to sum all this. So what we have to do here is eliminate this one and have for product one all the Andys here. This will work, we know. And let me select and copy and paste. Add this with all the marks for product one. And because it's a sum, we can sum it up. It's no problem. If it would be a count, We could also sum it up. It would be no problem. But never do this for the average if function. And in statistics, they will explain you why not. Yeah. So now we have a good solution. Now we have select for product one everybody who is Andy and calculate the sum of the turnovers. Select for product one everybody who is Mark, calculate the turnovers and add them together, and we have the total turnover for Mark and Andy for product one. But I should say for Mark and product one or Andy and product one. Okay, and this concludes everything you should know about count and sum if and sum ifs and count ifs function and average if and average ifs. And in the template, you will need the count if function, if I remember well, and you will need the average function, but even without the condition.